a distant future, long after the fall of humanity, a new race of beings called the Nephilim rose to power. Born from the ashes of the old world, the Nephilim were larger and more powerful than the humans that came before them. They possessed supernatural abilities, such as enhanced strength and speed, as well as the ability to control the elements and to manipulate energy. Despite their power, the Nephilim were not immune to the horrors of war. As they expanded and claimed new territories, they found themselves in conflict with other races and civilizations for centuries. They fought and died, their world torn apart by endless battles and bloodshed. But one day, a young Nephilim named Aria stood up and spoke out against the violence. She was a warrior, trained from a young age to fight and defend her people. But she had also seen the destruction and devastation that war had wrought, and she could no longer bear to be a part of it. "We are not meant to destroy, but to create," Aria said, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "We're the heroes of the old world, and it is our duty to rebuild and heal, not to destroy and kill." Her words were met with skepticism and resistance, but Aria was not deterred. She continued to speak out against the war and to advocate for peace, even as she faced opposition and danger from those who sought to silence her. Eventually, her message began to spread, and more Nephilim began to join her cause. Together, they worked to negotiate truces and ceasefires, to bring the fighting to an end and to create a new era of peace and cooperation. It was a long and difficult journey, but in time, the Nephilim succeeded in forging a new world, one that was free from the hatred and violence that had plagued them for so long. And as they looked back on the war-torn ruins of the old world, they knew that they had finally fulfilled their true destiny, to rise above the ashes and become the healers and builders of the new age. And they knew as the years passed, the Nephilim prospered and flourished in their new world. They built great cities and monuments, and created works of art and science that surpassed anything that humanity had ever achieved. They also established a new system of government, one that was based on cooperation and collaboration, rather than aggression and domination. But despite their successes, the Nephilim never forgot the lessons of their past. They knew that peace was not something that could be taken for granted, and that they must always be vigilant and prepared to defend themselves against those who would seek to do them harm. To this end, they maintained a powerful military, one that was trained and equipped to defend the Nephilim and their allies against any threats. They also formed alliances and treaties with other civilizations, ensuring that they would always have allies in times of need. But despite their best efforts, the Nephilim could not completely avoid conflict. There were always those who refused to accept the new order of peace, and who sought to reignite the flames of war. And so, the Nephilim were forced to continue to fight and defend themselves even as they worked to create a better future for all. Through it all, Aria remained a shining example of the Nephilim's determination and resilience. She continued to speak out for peace and justice, and to inspire others to follow her lead. And as she looked out at the world she had helped to create, she knew that she had fulfilled her destiny, and that the Nephilim would never again be consumed by the darkness of war. But as the Nephilim continued to thrive and grow, they began to face new challenges and threats. For one, the universe was not a static place, but was constantly expanding and evolving. And as the Nephilim explored and expanded into new territories, they encountered new civilizations and cultures, some of which were hostile and dangerous. In particular, the Nephilim found themselves in conflict with a race of beings called the Crackle, who were known for their brutal and militaristic ways. The Crackle were determined to conquer and enslave any civilization they encountered, and they saw the Nephilim as a potential threat to their ambitions. At first, the Nephilim tried to avoid confrontation with the Crackle, and to establish diplomatic relations with them. But the Crackle were not interested in peace, and they launched a series of devastating attacks on Nephilim territories. Faced with this threat, the Nephilim were forced to fight back. They mobilized their military and prepared for war, knowing that the fate of their civilization was at stake. And as the two sides clashed in a series of brutal battles, the Nephilim fought with all their strength and determination, determined to defend their homes and their way of life. Through it all, Aria remained a beacon of hope and courage, inspiring the Nephilim with her words and her deeds. She fought on the front lines, leading her troops and striking fear into the hearts of the Crackle. And as the war raged on, she never wavered in her belief that peace was possible, and that the Nephilim could emerge victorious. In the end, the Nephilim emerged victorious, thanks in large part to Aria's leadership and courage. The Crackle were defeated and forced to retreat, and the Nephilim were able to establish a new era of peace and prosperity. And as Aria looked out at the world she had helped to save, she knew that the Nephilim were stronger and more united than ever before, and that they would be able to face any challenges that lay ahead. But despite their victory over the Crackle, the Nephilim knew that the threat of war was never far away. There were always those who sought to disrupt the peace and to reignite the flames of conflict, but the Nephilim also recognized that the best defense was a strong and united society. And so, they worked to foster a culture of cooperation and collaboration, one that was based on mutual respect and understanding. They also encouraged their citizens to pursue their passions and interests, and to contribute to the greater good of the Nephilim civilization. Through it all, Aria remained a guiding light for the Nephilim. She continued to speak out for peace and justice, and to inspire others with her words and her deeds. And as she looked out at the world she had helped to create, she knew that the Nephilim were on the right path, and that they would be able to overcome any challenges that lay ahead. As the Nephilim continued to thrive and prosper, they began to explore the depths of space, seeking out new worlds and civilizations to encounter. They built powerful ships and developed advanced technology, and ventured out into the universe with curiosity and wonder. During their travels, the Nephilim encountered many different beings, some of which were friendly and cooperative, and others that were hostile and dangerous. They also learned much about the history and the mysteries of the universe, and discovered that they were not the only intelligent and powerful species in existence. But despite the challenges and the dangers they faced, the Nephilim never lost sight of their core values and beliefs. They remained committed to peace and cooperation, and to the pursuit of knowledge and progress. And as they explored the universe, they continued to spread their message of hope and unity, and to inspire others to join them in their quest. Through it all, Aria remained a symbol of the Nephilim's strength and determination. She continued to lead her people and to defend their interests, and to inspire others with her wisdom and her courage. And as she looked out at the vast expanse of space, she knew that the Nephilim had only just begun to fulfill their potential, and that the best was yet to come. As the Nephilim continued to explore and expand into the vastness of space, they encountered more and more civilizations and cultures. Some of these were friendly and cooperative, and the Nephilim were able to forge strong alliances and partnerships with them. But there were also those who were hostile and aggressive, and who sought to dominate and enslave others. The most dangerous of these were the Crackle, who had not forgotten their defeat at the hands of the Nephilim, and who sought revenge. And so, as the Nephilim continued to explore and expand, they found themselves drawn into a conflict that was larger and more complex than anything they had ever experienced before. The war had spread from their own galaxy to the neighboring ones, and the stakes were higher than ever. At first, the Nephilim were able to hold their own against the Crackle and their allies. They were a powerful and advanced civilization, with a strong military and advanced technology. But as the war raged on, they began to face new challenges and threats, and they realized that they could not win the war on their own. In order to prevail, the Nephilim would have to seek out new allies and partners, and to work together with other civilizations to defeat the common enemy. They would have to overcome their own prejudices and biases, and to learn to trust and cooperate with those who were different from themselves. And so, the Nephilim began to reach out and make contact with other civilizations, offering them the chance to join their cause and to fight for peace and freedom in the galaxy. And as the war raged on, they continued to fight and hope, knowing that their future, and the future of the entire galaxy, depended on their ability to unite and to overcome the darkness that threatened to consume them all. As the war against the Crackle and their allies raged on, the Nephilim realized that they needed to find a way to gain an advantage over their enemies. And so, they began a secret project to create a super soldier, a being that was stronger, faster, and more powerful than any of the other soldiers on either side of the conflict. The project took many years to complete, as the Nephilim scientists worked tirelessly to combine the genetic material of different species and to create a being that was the perfect combination of strength, heat, and intelligence. Finally, after 30 years of research and experimentation, the Nephilim succeeded in creating their super soldier. The being was a towering figure, with a muscular and powerful build, and glowing eyes that seemed to see into the very depths of the soul. Its skin was a metallic silver color, and it had long, flowing hair that seemed to move with a life of its own. The Nephilim named their creation the Silver Sentinel, and it quickly became the most feared and respected soldier in the entire galaxy. Its superhuman strength and speed made it almost invincible in battle, and it was able to single-handedly turn the tide of the war in favor of the Nephilim. But despite its impressive abilities, the Silver Sentinel was not without its own challenges and weaknesses. It was a being of poor power and aggression, and it struggled to understand and control its own emotions and impulses. And as the war raged on, despite its incredible strength and power, the Silver Sentinel struggled to find its place in the world. It was a being of poor aggression and violence, and it found it difficult to understand and control its own emotions and impulses. As the war raged on, the Silver Sentinel fought tirelessly to defend the Nephilim and their allies, but it began to feel more and more isolated and alone. It had no friends or companions, and it found it hard to relate to the other being. One day, the Silver Sentinel decided that it could no longer continue to fight in a war that it did not believe in. It left the battlefield and set out on a journey to discover its own identity and its own place in the world. As it traveled from planet to planet, the Silver Sentinel encountered many different beings and civilizations, and it began to learn more about the world and about itself. It met other super soldiers who had been created for different purposes and who had different experiences and perspectives. Through these encounters, the Silver Sentinel began to see the world in a different light, and to understand that there was more to life than just war and conflict. It began to question the actions and motivations of the Nephilim and the Crackle, and to wonder whether there was a better way to resolve their differences. And as it continued on its journey, the Silver Sentinel began to realize that as the Silver Sentinel continued on its journey, it encountered more and more super soldiers like itself, who had been created for different purposes and who had different experiences and perspectives. It began to realize that there was a whole community of super soldiers out there, and that they all shared a common bond and a common purpose. Inspired by this realization, the Silver Sentinel decided to gather all of the super soldiers it could find and to create a cult-like group that would be dedicated to promoting their interests and their way of life. It established a set of ranks and orders within the group, and a set of rules and regulations that all members were expected to follow. The group called itself the Order of the Silver Sentinel, and it quickly grew in size and influence. As more and more super soldiers joined, the Order became a powerful force in the galaxy, and its members were feared and respected by all. But despite its power and influence, the Order was not without its own challenges and weaknesses. Its members were all powerful and aggressive beings, and they struggled to control their emotions and impulses. And as the war raged on, the Order found itself drawn into more and more conflicts and battles, even as it sought to promote peace and cooperation. Despite these challenges, the Order continued to grow and to thrive, and it became a dominant force in the galaxy. And as the Silver Sentinel looked out at the world it had helped to create, it knew that the Order would continue to be a powerful and influential force, and that it would be able to shape the future of the universe in its. As the peace treaty took effect, the members of the Order of the Silver Sentinel found themselves facing a new challenge: how to adjust to a world without war. Many of them had been trained and conditioned to fight and to kill, and they struggled to adapt to a more peaceful and cooperative way of life. Some of the members of the Order decided to retire from active service and to settle down in the Nephilim territories where they could live in peace and safety. Others decided to continue to serve in the military, but in more peaceful and constructive roles, such as peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. But a few of the members of the order were unable to find a place in the new world, and they struggled to adjust to the changes. They felt lost and alone, and they yearned for the excitement and the thrill of battle. And so, these members of the order began to form their own rogue factions, and to carry out attacks and raids against the Nephilim and their allies. They saw themselves as the true defenders of the Nephilim way of life, and they were determined to protect it at all costs. The leaders of the order were horrified by these actions, and they did everything they could to stop the rogue factions and to bring them to justice. But despite their best efforts, the rogue factions continued to carry out their attacks, and the peace that had been so hard won began to unravel. As the situation worsened, the leaders of the order knew that they had to take drastic action. They decided to launch a massive campaign to root out the rogue factions and to restore order and stability to the galaxy. And so, the Order of the Silver Sentinel once again took up arms and embarked on a mission to bring the rogue factions to justice and to restore peace to the galaxy. It was a difficult and dangerous mission, but the members of the Order were determined to succeed and to protect the peace that they had fought so hard to achieve. One of the leaders of the rogue factions was a former member of the Order of the Silver Sentinel named Sarah. He was a powerful and skilled warrior, with a reputation for ruthless and brutal tactics. Another leader of the rogue factions was a Nephilim named Lilith, who had been a member of the Order until she was kicked out for disobeying orders. She was a brilliant strategist and a master manipulator, and she had a talent for making her followers do her bidding. The third leader of the rogue factions was a Crackle named Zorak, who had been a prisoner of war until he managed to escape and to form his own faction. He was a fierce and unforgiving fighter, with a deep hatred of the Nephilim and a desire to see them destroyed. The leaders of the rogue factions met in secret, in an underground bunker on a remote planet. They were planning their next move, and they were discussing ways to undermine the peace. As the Silver Sentinel burst into the bunker, the leaders of the rogue factions were caught off guard. They tried to fight back, but they were no match for the Silver Sentinel's superior strength and skill. In the end, the Silver Sentinel was able to defeat the leaders of these. The Silver Sentinel stood over the defeated leaders of the rogue factions. It knew that its mission was not yet complete. There were still other members of the rogue factions out there, and they would continue to fight and to cause chaos until they were stopped. And so, the Silver Sentinel set out on a mission to hunt down the remaining members of the rogue factions and to bring them to justice. It traveled from planet to planet, tracking down the rogue factions and confronting them in battle. Despite the challenges and the dangers, the Silver Sentinel remained determined and focused. It knew that it was the only one who could stop the rogue factions, and it was willing to do whatever it took to protect the peace that had been so hard won. Finally, after many months of fighting and tracking, the Silver Sentinel was able to locate and defeat the last of the rogue factions. With their defeat, the threat to the peace treaty was finally eliminated, and the galaxy was once again safe and secure. The leaders of the Nephilim and the Crackle were grateful to the Silver Sentinel for its efforts, and they hailed it as a hero and a savior. And as it looked out at the galaxy it had helped to protect, the Silver Sentinel knew that it had done its duty, and that it had helped to secure a better future for all.